Oh man, here we are again. I'm here way early. Gotta talk to my boss. Gonna try to get a raise. Stuff is so hard. But anyway, we were last time I talked about like why are certain things allowed to be out in the narrative and in the society and certain other things aren't. What is the purpose behind certain elements of it? Like for example, the Men in Black, like that's not a realistic thing to do, nor could you accomplish it by like doing it to everyone who's seen a UFO or whatever. But let's say it's real and it's actually happened before. What is the purpose behind that? Like, then the stuff about like it'll make society crumble and the religious stuff, like it'll undo religious values and doctrine, and people will, their faith will fall. And that's ironic because disclosure is happening at the same time as a revival of religion, especially of Christianity. And, thank God for that. But there's this revival, and for decades and decades and decades, all we've heard is like, it'll undo society and kill religion. I don't think that that's a thing, but why would that be out there so thoroughly, so thick, and I think that's because they want to, it's the secondary move after the disclosure, after they can't hold the ruse anymore. If they've talked about how stuff is spiritual, or there's a spiritual component or whatever, the natural move of the person was faith, that they hope is the natural reaction, is to like go away from that, like ignore that's there, don't act like it's relevant at all, go away from it, because to protect my faith, to protect my religious values, to protect that, and move like away. Like why, or just like why are these things allowed to be out there? You know what I mean? Like it's not as if we don't know that these government people can't censor or yank or whatever anything they want, right? They've been doing it on the legacy media for forever, but like on anything really, all they have to do is show a piece of paper with a judge's name signed on it. Like, I mean, and they just don't, they let certain things through, certain things not, I mean, like the Boeing guy, he whistle blew and then he was gone. Like, they killed him. Like, it's this, I mean, like, they can make whatever they want to happen, right? And it's just like, why do they communicate the way they communicate? The example I gave a few times ago was Kona Blue. They said, oh, this is all fake. No, this SAP was rejected, but then, we've done things like this in the past. And it's like, like the Bob Lazar stuff isn't like, I mean, like, why was he allowed to just be out there? Again, like the Boeing guy blew the whistle on like a major company. It wasn't even the United States. He blew the whistle on a major company and he was dead. Like, and just like boom, right after that, right? So like that's pretty high profile, like, media notice, like, but Bob Lazar goes to one reporter out of Las Vegas and, knows that the lights are going to come and that they're going to zoom around and stuff. Like, why is that allowed to just happen? Why is that allowed to go out there? Especially when you'd think the investment of Area 51 alone would be like all the reason you would need to, like, let's keep this as secret as possible for as long as possible, because this was expensive to build, right? Like, but all this alien focus and everything, they sort of made it like, yeah, it's infamous, but it's also sort of like a trope joke. You know what I mean? Like, all those camo dudes and all this stuff, it's turned into like a featurette of the ufology community. But why was that allowed to be done? Why is it allowed to? Why is the like, another thing that is real big now, here recently has become big, is why has the thing that's become big here recently is remote viewing. Everybody, like, lots of people are talking about remote viewing and how that was a focus and all this stuff, and the CIA and stuff is just allowing this stuff to be talked about with them. Why is that? And that element has been through for a long time. They've talked about, like, people have, they've known that the CIA and all this other agencies, deep state, whatever, has done that stuff for a while, for a long time. And so why is that element allowed to flourish? You know what I mean? Like, why, like, as much as the Roswell stuff was allegedly, hushed up or whatever to make it a more personal thing, the more that, even though that was very hushed up or whatever, I mean, the things that they've said and tried and done to, like, deny Roswell happened, right? Like, it's balloons. Oh, okay. Like, it was balloons. It was these dummies and all that. You know what I mean? Like, that's. But you're just allowing, by such terrible, feeble, like, attempts, you're just allowing that to flourish. Why is it that they're just, like, I mean, the people, like, on the other channel that I follow, How to Hunt with Steve, like, he lives real rural, lots and lots of rural communities and just citizens. It's Canada, British Columbia, and, but they're very similar to Americans. And, like, you would think, being a deep, dark, powerful, big, scary government, that, like, you could shut down these Bigfoot things, like these Bigfoot sightings and all this stuff that people are reporting. You could, like, not allow it, at the very least, to explode on the internet, right? Like, you could curtail that. You could go out to these rural communities, I would think, and be like, hey, no more of the talking about the Bigfoot stuff. Like, you wouldn't allow another thing that, and the Bigfoot stuff and the Sasquatch stuff and the alien stuff have in common is nuclear reactors and nuclear facilities, right? Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and Dogmen, which is this adjacent thing that, just like Bigfoot, like, thousands of people have written in and reported that they've seen these Dogmen. And in these nuclear facility situations, the Dogmen and the Bigfoot Sasquatch, both, like, they'll just dead charge these facilities and try to break in. The aliens will come around and like somehow mess with the controls and stuff, you know. And all of that stuff's been known for a long, long time. All that stuff's like been known and talked about and allowed to just flourish for a long, long time. Why? Why is that? You know what I mean? What is the purpose of these things? Of these elements of all this stuff? Because after, like I said a couple videos before, doesn't it start to feel like it's all the same story? And it's all like, not only are all these things connected, but it's like it's all elements of like the same story, right? And it just seems like, and it seems more and more as well, that story goes deep into the humanity's past, right? However that works, it seems to go very deeply in humanity's past, and it seems like more and more that a whole lot of stuff in the deep past happened to a whole lot of people that had reached a insane level of technological advancement, a level that we certainly don't give them credit for. And all of that is just like, you know, I think a lot of this stuff, right, the way it's controlled, disseminated, and put out there, a lot of this stuff is it's not consciously like some evil villain has like figured out the plan and he's ordered a bunch of people to do a bunch of things. That's, you know what I mean? Like, there's a few people that have like the guiding hand, and they, you know, they might arrange that or whatever, but most of it is done by like just humanity's more shitty qualities, right? And a good example of that is all of the archaeology. It doesn't take just a big, bad, dark, deep state government. It's not just those kinds of things that'll really screw over a person or try to control and do that to a subject matter or whatever. It's not just that kind of thing that'll do that. Look at archaeologists. Like, archaeologists and all this stuff that's just coming out now because thanks to the internet and regular folk that are like putting in the work, like all of this stuff is coming out, you know, Gobekli Tepe, all this Younger Dryas stuff, all this stuff is only now starting to go out. And that's because like a lot of these, you know, players that are known nowadays, like Graham Hancock, he'll just tell you like, oh, they just didn't, that just went against their grain, that Younger Dryas theory. So they were just like, no, screw you. And they'd rather sit in their cathedrals to bullshit like the Ivy League universities dressed like Indiana Jones, sipping cognac, you know, talking about how, you know, great Egypt is and blah, 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 and the things that they saw when they went there that one time. And there's just like this adoption of this culture that's taken over where all the regular folks that'll do stuff and do work, like all that's been replaced with the very rich and like PhD students who are gonna like go straight through school for 17 years writing like dissertations on, you know, this blah 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 documented angle of thus and so building that way. And it, you know, but like that culture is responsible for how much holding us back. And that's not a deep state dark government like, you know, the alien stuff. Like, that's more or less like, oh, just a bunch of privileged ass, you know, rich dickheads that, you know, have taken over. Like, they've made a culture, and it's hundreds of years old in archaeology. Like, it's been like that for forever. There's no telling the kinds of things that they've discovered and know and all the rest, but it's just like not accepted. They don't like it because that doesn't fit in with their narrative of everything's this. Like, Do these people not know that we don't understand that science, any kind of science stuff, that's how you know it's their religion. It's their thing, their religious doctrine. Because they pretend like we don't all know that science is just as good as the information we have today, right? But as soon as that information could change everything, if we get new information tomorrow, and it's just like, I hate that. Like, just like no one's gonna take it personally if they find out that like the Big Bang happened, 80 billion years ago instead of 14 something. Like, they're not gonna, the world's not gonna end if somebody discovers some things and then they're like, hey, yeah, I figured out all this Younger Dryas stuff and it corresponds with the histories of the Bible and other religious doctrines that were culturally relevant all throughout the last 2,000 years that talked about floods. You know what I mean? Like, oh, let's just adapt. Like, okay, let's incorporate that into the mix. Not these people, because they did all their stuff and wrote all their papers and invested all their money, and they hang out at Harvard and Yale and Cambridge and Oxford so many times a week and all that. And like, they can't have any rocking of the boats. You know what I mean? And so it's like, well, thankfully the internet's made it to where people can just say, well, to hell with you then. You stay there at Harvard. We're going to go out to Egypt and figure some stuff out. We're going to go and look at some stuff and how the heck is this stuff possible without modern day technology? And so there's that whole thing is just human nonsense. That's a culture that's taken over a subject matter that has done nothing but been a disservice to everyone that's ever had any interest in that subject matter. And so, it's just like the alien stuff. And it's just like, and it's the same, really, if you think about it. The alien approach sort of set a different, the alien trajectory sort of set a different precedent layer on top of all of these. Because ever since Blue Book and if you believe the stuff that's been uncovered or allowed, like I said, allowed to just be out there and known, is that Blue Book was it was many different layers, but one of the things was an infiltration of the media and control that. And once again, a permeation of a culture that took certain subject matters and turned them into, if you say anything about them, you're going to be seen as the pinnacle of ridiculousness. And they did that to the subject matter of aliens. And it's like, and they did that with aliens, and then other groups and other things that are trying to block stuff and hold stuff back, they did it with theirs. And it's like archaeology. How long are you going to say that Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson are just like crazy old men that are out there just making shit up? Like, well, I guess not. I guess not, since now they're talking about the Younger Dryas on mainstream, and there's scientific, verifiable proof on this stuff. For decades they were like, oh, these freaking people, blah, blah. Oh, well, and it corresponds to our ancestors' account. Guess you don't know everything, but that was if you said that for that entire time, they were making these people out to be crazy dumbasses. They're ridiculous for even mentioning this. This is a ridiculous thing to say. These people are ridiculous. Anyone who says it shares in their ridiculous. And so it became a subject that wasn't discussed in public. Regular people never stopped discussing it, but it was, friend to friend, family member to family member stuff. It's not, for a long time, it wasn't so accessible like it is on the internet now. thank God. And but that kind of started with the alien stuff, and now if you think, like, that's the biggest move on the Sasquatch front. The biggest move on the Sasquatch front is, what did you say you saw in the woods? You're such an attention seeking, like, ridiculous person. Like Steve likes to talk about people that, like, outdoorsmen that he'll run across, or they'll run across him out there in the sticks or whatever, and they'll get to talking or whatever, and he'll ask them straight up, like, you ever seen anything weird out in this area when you've been out here visiting or anything? And they'll get to talking about that subject, and inevitably someone will have a story, but also inevitably, just as likely, someone will say, man, I've been coming out here for 40 years, from the time I was a child to present day, and I've never seen a Bigfoot. I've never experienced anything weird. I've never, it's just been blacktail and bear, and that's all, you know what I mean? And it's like, that is because that person saying that because they've been influenced by something they've never questioned, that's just been a trope that's taken over that part of their social development. Like, what does it matter to you if your buddy and this other person have seen Bigfoot or not? It doesn't. But, like, you think that this is ridiculous, and so, like, you're just not, like, cool and disengage and go on. Like, you have to, like, verify against it, right? Like, that's because so much shit has been talked about this stuff. Like, you can't just be like, awesome, and then go on about your business and talk about whatever. Like, you have to be like, nuh-uh, that's bullshit. And then they'd be like, I've never, and try to, like, disprove it, right? And that's just, like, that comes from that same kind of thing. Like, if you say stuff about this, you're a crazy person, dumbass, who's just an uncultured, out there in the sticks, white trash, dumb, idiot, ignorant, like, wild person who doesn't know any better, right? And that's just, like, that's been so effective in relation to these subject matters, because it's had them underground for so long. And now, just now, the internet's starting to have a major effect on a lot of them. About, like, 20 years of the internet was compiling and gathering it all up, pretty much. But then, only within the last few years has it been, like, in these areas, been like, hey, here's a really big, like, focus magnifying glass on this thing. Like, I can't tell you, like archaeology again, how many things I see on YouTube. That's one video after the other. Like, these are videos and photos and stuff taken from, like, right nowadays time frame, and they're discussing this different feature, that different feature, this different feature, and trying to figure out, like, how these things were machined. Like, only here recently, within the last 5 years or so, has that been done and be made manifest by the presence of the internet. And so whilst that's awesome, that's truly awesome. Like, the things that have been done have been so effective, and put them for a long time, put all these subject matters underground, right? Like, and that has done, like, untold damage, because it's allowed the government and different organizations or groups or whatever, it's allowed them to say stuff like, get those other tropes put out there. Oh, this is bad for your spirituality. It'll hurt your religious values, your religious beliefs. Oh, this is no good, because you don't want to, you don't want to be seen as stupid, right? Like, or you don't want to be seen as crazy, right? Or you don't want to, you don't want your society and your country to be destroyed, do you? And it's just like, those things have been so effective throughout the decades, especially of the 20th century. And like, not only did it put the subject underground where only the fringes would even touch it or look at it or anything like that, it's also given them like 90 years to get all their Area 51s and reverse engineering and all their info that they have under lock and key all coordinated and everything figured out. And hey, how are we going to avoid FOIA if that ever comes up? Oh, well, we'll just give it to Lockheed Martin to hold in a storage facility instead of in a government's facility, so that Freedom of Information Act won't work, so that no one can access it, because you can't do a Freedom of Information Act to a company. You know, like, these, it's like, again, these directions and elements that have allowed to be out there, but then these it's so tightly controlled in so many other ways, you know, with that. And I don't know, it's that's always, when it comes to, like, especially the alien stuff and, like, you know, and the Bigfoot stuff, like, the more and more and more, you know, all this stuff starts to sound like elements of the same story. And when you look at it like that, when you see these patterns and when you see these things, these connections manifest themselves, like, if you're like, yeah, that would, you know, that seems like that totally makes sense, especially when you're looking at all of it together, you know, from like the 30,000 foot, like, angle, like, and you can see all of the pieces, like, and that in turn makes stuff that, like, does get through to me pop out more and more. And, you know, and I notice stuff like that more and more and more, like, what's the point behind the Men in Black and all the other ones that I listed before? Like, why would you allow that to just happen? Why would you, you know, it's just crazy. You know, another example of a non-alien related deep dark government thing. I saw this story on the internet. You know, it was just like strange but true, or supposedly true, whatever stories, you know, thing. And the story was that the Russians in secret thought they were going to do this was a couple decades ago. The Russians in secret thought they were going to do a expedition to Antarctica and drill down into these lakes that haven't been exposed to open air or in the surface of Earth for like millions of years. And it's just lakes trapped in completely you know, enclosed in ice sheet. And they're huge, apparently. And the way that, like, they did it was they got all these great scientists and made it to where it's like, it looked like a global thing, but only face to face and like these people, but like the Russians were very much in control. And so they get there, they drill down, they drill into this lake. They go into, it's pitch black, you know, because there's no light. They go into the water with their scuba gear and their like little mobile submarine remote control thing. And there's this creature down there that they name Creature 36B, that's like an octopus but with 14 legs. And like it does all this stuff, like change its shape and produce light on its own and trick them and lure them away from each other, and like does all this like heinously and very intelligent, very malevolent, like hunts them. And it like ends up like killing and eating quite a few of them. And then they're like, screw this. And they went down in there again, and they're like, got weapons, and they essentially taser at this thing to death, like, or practically almost to death. They just, like, they freaking go down there with some big charges and like popped his ass. And then once he was out, they gathered him all up or whatever, put him in like some kind of containment cage, and then took the cage out and got it out of the area back up to the surface where the facility was. And then they airlifted the whole thing to according to the story, they airlifted the whole thing back to Russia. And it was like, allegedly Vladimir Putin has used they've researched with it, like what they got from having that. They've researched poisons or something. I don't remember it verbatim, but that's like, you know. And then the way that this allegedly came out was because all of a sudden one of the scientists like showed up one day at the American embassy from Russia, and he's like just defecting, and he comes out with this story. And that's why, but again, like, why would that even be allowed to be out? Like, that dude's literally, if that's even true at all, any element is, he was right there with the government. That's the one thing we all know, apparently, that absolutely was true. He was in that building talking with them, and they still just allowed this, you know, seemingly bullshit, crazy story out to just be. Why? Why would you do that? You know, like, why would you allow all this lore and myth and all this stuff to come and, you know, and be about Antarctica? There's all this stuff floating around all the time about Antarctica. Why would you just allow that? Why would you just allow that? I mean, like, if you were to say, as the government in America, like, if you were to be like, you know, hey, we've decided, seems like there's a lot of interest, so we're going to go down to Antarctica and check it all out, guys, all right? Like, we'd support you. Like, yeah, there's a lot of myth and lore and legend about all that down there. Like, let's go and do it. But they, like, just allow these BS stories to float around. And it's just like, for what? I don't know. But now I have to take a break. I'll be right back. Sorry, you fell.